Hey guys, welcome to my channel. In today's video, we are going to talk about how we can deploy the React application to an Azure App Service using the Azure Devops Pipeline. Before we start diving into the deployment step, first I would like to show the quick preview of what our application look like. So this is the one of the default application that is being provided by React, and you can create this application using the create React app command. So once we run that command, we got like the default project. And if I run that project, the UI screen will look like this. So this is the application that we are going to deploy to an app service. So let's get started. Create pipelines. To start working on the pipeline, you need to first log into the dev.azure.com and select your project. Go to the pipeline section. Here we need to set up two pipelines. One is the build pipeline and another one is the release pipeline. The build pipeline is basically to create the build artifact, and the release pipeline is to deploy that artifact to the app service. So first we'll start with the build pipeline. To create the build pipeline, simply navigate to the pipelines and click new pipeline button. Here you have two options to create the pipeline. One is using the YML file and another one is the classic editor. For this video, I'm going to use the classic editor. First, you need to select the source. There are different source control options that you have here. In my case, my source code lives in the Azure repo Git. So I've selected Azure repo Git. I've selected my project, my repository, and the branch. This branch is the branch that you wanted to use for the deployment. Select empty job. Here we need to add few tasks, which I'm going to show it in this video. Before we add a task, let's rename this and give a name to our pipeline. So React app. Now in the get source, we just need to make sure that our repo and branch is selected properly. And in the agent specification, I'm going to use the Ubuntu latest. Now in the agent job, we need to add few tasks. First, I'll add all the tasks, then I'll explain the purpose of each and every task. npm build. This is the command that builds the source code. Now here we need to define the root folder for package.json. My package.json lives under the app folder, so I'll select the app. Same thing we also need to define here as well. Now I have added all the tasks that is required to build my React app. I'll go each and every task one by one. npm install command will install all the React library dependencies. It is a kind of a equivalent of a .NET restore to restore the NuGet packages. npm run build will create the folder that we will use then push to our application. Copy files. This is copying the build output to a target folder, and the build output is basically the variable where our build get generated. Archive files is used to archive the files into a zip file for publishing, and publish artifact drop is used to publish the zip file. Now let's save and queue. We'll add a comment. This will take a couple of minutes, so I'm going to pause the recording and we'll resume when the build pipeline get executed successfully. If there's any error, I'll explain that error too. Now the pipeline execution has been completed, and also all the steps that we have added executed successfully. Here we can see the pipeline also generated the build artifact. So if I go, I'll see this drop folder, and I can see the zip file which is contain all the files that is required we need to deploy to run our React application. As our pipeline get executed successfully and it also generate the output that we need, we can get started with our release pipeline. Before creating the release pipeline, let's first create the app service where we need to deploy our React application. To create the app service, you have to log into the portal.azure.com, and here first you have to create a subscription if you don't have already. If you have it, then you can use your subscription. To create the app service, select the app service, select resource group, give the app service name, the runtime stack that I'm using is Node 16 as my application is a React app. In the operating system, you can choose Linux or the Windows. For this demo, I'm using the Windows as I'm more comfortable with the Windows. That's why. I'm going to use the SQ in the size which is basic B1. This is a free tier and does not cost me enough. So I want to use for testing and deployment purpose, I want to use the free tier, which is the basic B1. But when you are deploying into the production or any higher environment, you can configure to the higher SQ, which cost some money. Navigate to the next step. We can keep it default. We'll set it default. Monitoring, we'll set it default. Tags, We do not need to add tags at this point. Review and create. This will deploy the Azure App Service to the Azure cloud. Now the deployment is completed. We'll go to the overview section or select go to resources. This comes with this URL, and if I open this URL, it renders the template page which shows that the app service is up and running. Now, as we have the app service up and running, it's time to create the release pipeline. To create the release pipeline, select the pipelines and click on the releases. Click on the new release pipeline. Here, in this case, we are deploying to the Azure App Service, so we have selected the Azure App Service deployment. This will add the default steps that is required to deploy the React app to an Azure service. These are the stages, like we do have dev, QA, stage, prod. In this case, I am using it as a dev because that's the first environment where we are deploying the build. Here you need to select an artifact. To select an artifact, click on Add Artifact. Here you can define the source type, which is build, project, from which project your repo lives in. We need to select the source build pipeline. So the pipeline that we have created is the React app build pipeline. Once I select my pipeline, it asks me the default version. The default version will be deployed when the new releases are created. The version can be changed for manual created release at the time of release creation. We can also specify at the time of release creation specific version. In this case, I'm using the. Now here we define the stage. Dev deploy dev. Here we need to select the Azure subscription. If you don't have the Azure subscription already added, you can create an Azure subscription using the manage, which I'm going to cover in a different video. Right now I have already added my Azure subscription with my Azure Devops repo, so I can able to select. We need to select the app type. Here I'm selecting the web app on Windows. There are different type of apps that you can select, but in my case, the app service environment is Windows, and the application that I'm deploying is the web app. So that's the reason I've selected web app on Windows. I need to select the app service name. This is the app service that we have just created. So if I go to my portal.azure.com, this is the app service that we have created. So I need to select the app service name. We can keep this one as default. Here's the artifact which is going to be deployed. Here, make sure the connection type is resource manager and your Azure subscription key is being added. Rest, I'll keep it default configuration. My pipeline is all set up. Now I'll save, add a comment, created pipeline for deploying React test app. Our release pipeline is being set up. We just need to rename this to some valid name. You can choose any name that you want. Now our release pipeline setup is being completed. To test the release pipeline, create releases, deploy the code to our Azure App Service. Now the deployment is being completed successfully. If I check the logs, all the step has been succeeded. We can go back to the portal.azure.com to our app service. We'll restart this app service. Refresh the app service. Now when I'm refreshing this page, instead of rendering the template, it should render the React application. So let's go ahead and refresh. I can see the React application is being deployed to the app service that we just created. To test whether the deployment pipelines are working as expected, let's go ahead and modify the code and redeploy the site again. To modify the code, navigate to the repo. This is the repo that we are using. Click on the app folder, src app.js. Let's go ahead and edit the code. For testing purpose, we can add some comment here. Deploying React app to app service created by Nathan. Commit the code. Go to the pipeline. This is the pipeline we just built. Click on the run pipeline. It will take a couple of minutes to complete the execution. As we see, the build pipeline executed successfully, and it also generates the artifact. Now go to the release pipeline. This is the release pipeline that we have. I'm going to create a release and update a comment, deploy after edit the text. Now this will deploy the changes that we just did in the Azure App Service. We can go to the portal.azure.com, restart the app service one more time, refresh. And here we can see the updated text that we just did. There's one small thing. Let's take an example. You need to deploy the build continuous fashion, like when you are committing the code to your release branch. In my case, the branch name is main. You need to trigger the build. How you can do that? There's one small change that you need to do in the release pipeline. So go to the release pipeline, edit the release pipeline. Here you need to enable this continuous deployment trigger. Once you enable it, anytime when you check in your changes to your release branch, it will trigger the build. These are the simple steps to deploy a React application to an Azure App Service. Hope you like the video. Please subscribe my channel. This helped me to motivate myself and keep creating these type of videos. Thank you.